Before we get started, please just make sure that your name is labeled correctly. And if not, go ahead and rename yourselves. Make sure you include your name, your organization, pronouns. You just need to hover over your video. There's 3 dots that you want to select, and then the option to rename. And while you're at it, please introduce yourselves in the chat. Please know that you're more than welcome to submit questions in the chat at any time. The last 20 minutes or so will be dedicated to audience Q&A, where you can raise your hands or ask questions out loud, whichever your preference. Okay, well, with that said, let's get started. Welcome everyone to today's Transportation Tuesday webinar series, Making the Connection, how the Interagency Signage Program helps solve a complex regional problem. Just wanted to say thank you for joining us. I really appreciate your time. I'm John Sung. I'll be moderating today's webinar. I work in the RTA's Regional Coordination Division. I'm a project manager for the maintenance side of our Interagency Sign Program. Before working at RTA, I, like many of other folks, viewed signage as something you only really think about when you need it and it's unavailable. But over the past 5 years with the agency, I've come to realize that signage is a crucial part of every transit rider's experience. And given that the region is home to 3 transit operators, producing uniform signage is surprisingly complex. So today, we'll dive into the RTA sign program, and later, we'll hear from representatives from the city of Aurora on how our coordination has left a positive impact in their community. And at this time, I'd like to introduce our esteemed guests, Alex Manila and Derek Winston from the city of Aurora. Would you two please introduce yourselves to the group?
Sure. Alex Minella, Senior Planner with the Mayor's Office of Economic Development with the City of Aurora for slightly over 8 years now, and happy to be here. Thank you very much for having me here.
Welcome.
And I'm Derek Winston. I'm the Assistant Superintendent of Fleet and Facility Maintenance, and I head up the maintenance of the buildings and grounds of the Aurora Transportation Center. I worked with the City of Aurora for just nearly 20 years, and happy to be here.
Awesome, thank you and welcome. All right, so let's begin with an overview of our sign program. The purpose of our program is to provide information to transit passengers that will allow them to make connections necessary to get to their final destinations, especially if those connections are in between agencies. So we first started off with an extensive user research back in 2005, which concluded that information coordination in the field was severely lacking in our system. So we tested some initial signage prototypes, developed design standards for those products, and then fabricated and installed pilot signs at 4 demo locations in 2012. Based on that initial work, we secured a federal grant of $4.2 million to design, fabricate, and install such signs at 19 key interagency locations. This involved 5 separate contracts to complete 4 phases of work, resulting in over 1,000 signs installed in our region. And I should note that all of this work involved extensive coordination with and cooperation from staff at the service boards, various municipalities, host railroads, and several private property owners. Through these coordinating efforts, our team worked passionately to ensure that transit riders have signage that is ADA compliant, uniform, accessible, and accurate in northeastern Illinois. On the screen, you'll see 2 maps showing the 19 completed locations, which are marked with blue dots, and 4 earlier demo locations marked with red dots. The demo locations were Van Buren Street in downtown Chicago, Davis Street in Evanston, Joliet Union Station, and a bus transfer in Evergreen Park. We divided those locations into 4 sets or bundles, representing 4 separate contracts for sign fabrication and installation, 1 contract for each bundle. This work was substantially completed as of last summer, but we have some leftover grant funding that we're currently using for our bundle 4 locations. As part of our latest phase, we'll be installing signs at the 6 locations above within the next year: Sox 35th, Rue Jones, 55th, 56th, 57th Street Station, Clybourne, Gresham, Healy, and Western. So right now, we're currently working with our contractors to determine sign artwork, sign placement, as well as the creation of story map collages and aerial maps. This photo here is from a field visit last month to the Clybourne Metra station. This is a pre-sign, pre-installation work that we typically do with our design and engineering contractors. This is to get a good idea of what kind of signs and where they will be placed. So a lot of this is still preliminary. The locations above are currently under construction or will be soon under construction later this year. These are non-RTA construction projects. So through coordination efforts between us and Metra, our team will create a signage plan for all the locations above, but we will wait until construction projects are complete before going in. This is a picture of where the new Auburn Park Station will be located. This is in the Auburn Gresham neighborhood on the south side of Chicago. And we took this picture on May 12th during a field visit with our engineering and design contractors. So the usefulness of our regional transit system depends on the ability of people to make transfers between trains and buses. Unfortunately, this can sometimes be confusing, especially for a new rider who wants to make a connection. So for example, a Metra rider who just got off the train in downtown Evanston might be confused regarding how to board the CTA Purple line to Howard, or possibly a new reverse commuter arriving on a PACE bus. They find it difficult to navigate from the bus stop to the Metra outbound platform. Our interagency sign program was designed to address such challenges and make transfers between CTA, Metra, and PACE as seamless as possible. Not only in places like downtown Chicago or Evanston, but all across the region. During our onset years of the program, circa 1999, one of the first things we did was to conduct some basic user research. This is with the goal of getting a better handle on what riders currently experience. This is back several decades ago while using the system. This research effort, which was conducted in 2005, involved experts documenting their observations of people in various transit locations in our region, combined with ride-along research with recruited participants who were trying to make the trip. Questions like, where were they trying to go? How did they plan the trip? What tools did they use to plan and make the trip? What problems and frustrations did they encounter? And most importantly, how did they work around said problems? The user research resulted in a comprehensive rider experience model and recommendations that we use to guide our subsequent product development. Based on our foundational user research, we decided that the most pressing need was to address information coordination. This is also the aspect of coordination that the RTA was best suited to address, since it was fully within our purview, and we had been doing some of this already for a number of years with our system map and transit information center. We also realized that information coordination is where we could get the most bang for our buck. So we got right to work, designing some new information products to help guide passengers through our extensive regional transit system. In parallel with field testing, we also conducted lab testing of initial prototypes with our recruited users. The lab testing explored the use of colors, symbols, and fonts throughout the various information products. With the combined results from the field and lab testing, we then moved forward with the development of an integrated suite of passenger information products. And we'll get to see some in just a moment. Those products and all of the many components of those products were detailed in the design standards manual that we first published back in 2014. And we continue to update this document periodically with the onset of new products. To give you some idea about how comprehensive it is, I will just say that it's over 250 pages long. Now, let's look at some components of our sign program in detail. We basically have three types of signs. We have identity signs, which help passengers identify what transit services are available at that location. We have wayfinding signs that assist passengers as they navigate between the boarding areas, including and a special focus on our accessible riders. Service information panels, which provide details to the transit routes that are available at each location. All of these products are designed to work together to help our passengers make connections. Here's a few examples of our identity products. The objective of these products is to orient the customer to the train and bus transfer connections by using graphic icons and symbols. At the bus stop, a lettered lollipop style sign is mounted above the bus stop sign to provide visual clues for passengers making bus connections. Maybe some of our fellow transit riders have seen these already pop up through our region. Identity maps like this one right here for Lyle are typically installed near a train entrance. Here are some examples of our wayfinding signs. These are our overhead signs, typically mounted above our doorways or in tunnels. Otherwise, we have mounted right onto sign poles. Here's our train connections map. It combines the CTA and Metro rail network all into one map. We've identified train-to-train transfer locations. We've identified pedestrian transfer pathways. We've also provided a station index. These are typically produced in our large format. They're all 32 by 44 inches, and we typically house them in some type of cabinet, whether they're floor mounted like this one here. This is Elgin at the Pace bus terminal, which is right across the street from the Metra station. So we typically have these installed near or on a train platform, along with bus connections and neighborhood maps. We'll get into a little bit more detail of those two later. Okay, so this is an example of our bus connections map. It identifies all the routes that radiate from the transfer location. The bus route timetables for each boarding area are provided. The timetable header identifies the corresponding boarding area for the customer. And we typically have these displayed on or near a train platform. All right, so on the left, oops, there we go. On the left is a sample of our neighborhood map. This represents approximately a quarter-mile walk radius from the transfer location. Train lines, train stations, bus boarding areas, and bus routes are identified here. We've included a places of interest and a street index, also produced in a large format. The product on the right is a train route diagram. We typically post these near the entrance or an access point of a train boarding platform. Okay, moving to the bus side. Here are some of our bus times and bus boarding area information products. The bus times diagram here on the left is designed for departing bus customers. Scheduled bus departure times specific to the boarding area are provided. Route travel times and rail and bus transfer opportunities are also identified here. Here on the right, a bus boarding area map. This is a hybrid wayfinding informational product. This is a smaller version of the station identity map that I mentioned a few slides ago. Our goal here is to orient customers to the surrounding transfer locations. We've also included directional wayfinding here to help orient customers to their connecting bus and train services. The graphic on the right here is how all these sign components work together. I'm particularly fond of these lollipop style bus stop letters, and it's been a treat to see more installations of this particular product pop out throughout the region. If you've ever taken transit in London, you might recognize this style of lettering bus stops. I haven't, but you know, Google Maps. Moving on to the next slide. In 2017 and 2018, one of our contractors fabricated and installed new signs and maps at the following Bundle 1 locations: Elgin, Harvey, Lake Cook, Lisle, Montrose Mayfair in the city, Naperville, and Roosevelt Museum Campus, also in the city. In Harvey, the Metro Electric Station is above grade and it's on an embankment, and nearby Pace facility is across the street and a block away from the nearest Metro entrance. The overhead sign on the left points folks to the from the Metro platform down to the Pace terminal. The bus connections map on the right provide details on all the Pace routes that depart from the Harvey Transportation Center. Here at Museum Campus, we are trying to help people connect between the Roosevelt CTA train stations and the Metro Electric Station that is a few blocks away and below grade and in the middle of Grant Park. The photo on the left shows a directional sign along Roosevelt pointing riders to their CTA connections ahead. The photo on the right shows the downtown Chicago transit map, which is located on the 11th Street Bridge overlooking the Metro Electric tracks and the skate park. This is by far my most favorite sign location in the entire system. It offers a beautiful view of the skyline and the surrounding area. Apparently, this is also the skaters' favorite sign to vandalize. I don't know why they dislike this sign so much, but I've taken a special interest in it ever since vandalism became a regular occurrence. And if anyone sees anything up there, please let me know. In 2019 and 2020, a different RTA contractor fabricated and installed signs and maps at the following Bundle 2 locations: Aurora, Harlem Lake, Oak Park, Irving Park, Jefferson Park, Main Street, Evanston, Waukegan, and Wheaton. And considering that we have two guests from Aurora with us today, I'd like to highlight some Aurora transportation signage on the following slide. Aurora Transportation, ATC is the terminus of Metra's BNSF line, and it serves as a transfer location for 6 PACE bus routes. The city of Aurora recently relocated the PACE Transfer Center so that the new bus stops are now adjacent to the Metra tracks, to the photo on the left. Our signs went in just after the work was completed by the city in April 2020. And the photo on the right will be, it shows the installation of an RTA sign structure, something similar to what you saw at Elgin about 10 slides ago, but instead of 3 panels wide, we gave them 4. Later on today, our panelists are going to get into how these and why these signs were installed here, discuss plans for future signage installations, and the impact that it's had in the community. In 2020 and 21, the RTA's contractor fabricated and installed signs at the following Bundle 3 locations: Blue Island, Vermont Street Metro stations, Chicago Union Station, LaSalle Street Station, Millennium, and Ogilvie Transportation Center. In Blue Island, Metra's adjacent Rock Island District and Electric District stations are located across Vermont Street from each other. Our contractor fabricated all the signs and maps for Blue Island and installed most of them last year. Sometime this year, Metra's contractor will install the remaining signs and maps as part of their construction project to rehab the historic Rock Island District Station. The photo on the left shows a new PACE bus shelter with RTA signs and maps inside and outside. The stop is located in downtown Blue Island, a few blocks away from our Metra stations. The photo on the right shows a directional sign at the Vermont Street crosswalk between 2 Metra stations. Once again, here's an overview of all the signs that we've installed since 2017. And this concludes my presentation. A friendly reminder that if you want to submit some questions in the chat, you may do so at any time. During the audience Q&A, please feel free to raise your hand or ask questions out loud, as I mentioned. And so now that we're all up to speed on our sign program, what it's all about and how it works, I'd like to dive a little deeper with our representatives from the city of Aurora and how our partnership resulted in some transit-related improvements in that community. So I'm going to stop sharing here. All right, Alex.
Yes.
How are you?
Very good. Very good.
Okay. So I got the first one
for everybody.
Yes, absolutely. Same. Can you tell us a little bit about the Aurora Pedestrian Access to Transit Improvement Plan?
Absolutely. So the city of Aurora staff recognized almost a few years ago, originally in 2014, and then materialized in something more tangible in 2016, that improvements were very much needed. Let's not forget, Aurora is the terminus of the BNSF line to Chicago. And with an average of slightly over 2,000 passengers a week, it's one of the busiest stations on the BNSF line. So with this being said, we had to acknowledge the need for improvements. To some extent, the station and the facility itself could have been perceived as dated and not customer friendly, in the sense that there was very much so confusion of the means of traffic. And not only that, but the passengers were, quote unquote, put at risk simply because there was no clear path where the train was going to depart or to arrive. And from one bank to another, there was a mix of traffics. With people, of course, we can understand the rush in the morning and the rush at the end of the day to get out of the train station. There was a mix of pedestrian traffic, vehicular traffic, bus traffic, and cab traffic. So with this being said, we reached out to RTA, who made available a technical assistance program. And we all combined joint efforts to study the case and find the best solutions to make this station not only no longer the stepchild, but the terminus and very important station in the overall system. So after months and months of research, tedious at times, just analytical data to be scrutinized, we found out that the station could have been improved in a much more friendly way. With this being said, we identified that the means of traffic east and west of the track, the tracks were slightly different and could have captured certain buckets of populations and certain buckets of passengers. So we decided to improve the east side of the tracks with a kiss and ride, as well as the west side. We also provided for additional parking spaces so that we were not going to put the burden only on the east side of the tracks where there's plenty of parking spaces, but still, if you are in a rush to catch the train, then you might lead that traffic, those passengers into possible accidents down the road. So, and not only that, but we enhanced the crosswalks, because we cannot forget that passengers not only arrive to the station by car or by bike, but also by foot. So the crosswalks and the sidewalks were resurfaced or enlarged or made more safe and user-friendly, so that we could capture additional pedestrian traffic from east or west of the train station. And because of what I was mentioning before, the confusion, when you arrived at the Y at the beginning of the railroad, you had to make a very clear choice in a split of a second. Should I go left or right? Without necessarily a reason. It was more guided by your guts. So now, with the enhanced signage, traffic could and can now decide, okay, that's the track where the train is going to depart, where that's the track where the train is going to arrive. And so with the signage, electronic signs that could be seen from the distance, there's no confusion. There's no room for confusion, and passengers can have a much happier experience of traveling using public transportation. And these improvements have always helped to raise the percentage of users, commuters, and it's slightly so. But, of course, in the middle we had COVID, which drastically took a bite of the passengers component, but still, I would say that all these improvements with enhanced parking, enhanced signage, enhanced lighting, and the platforms made more user-friendly as well, with the canopies where you could shelter during a heavy rain or snowstorms. That helped a lot, tremendously.
Thank you, Alex. That's very insightful. I actually, I need to go back and screen share. I cut out just a little early. I kind of wanted to have this in the background. This photo was taken less than 3 months ago. We have this great near map subscription, and no photo is more than 3 months old. And I mean, I could have chosen one from 2020, but the bridge wouldn't have been completely done. So I just wanted to have this in the background as we're discussing. Alex, I have a question for you. Can you take us through the timeline starting in 2016? I'm curious about the first phase of your transit improvement program. What kind of activities were completed? I'm curious about like the statuses of each of the 5 recommendations that they mentioned, and I can quickly go over that. The plan called for modifying existing ATC parking lots to improve pedestrian and multimodal safety and access, relocating the Pace Bus Transfer Center, constructing a 750-foot bridge over the Fox River, constructing new parking lots on the west side of the Fox River, and installing new traffic signals and intersection improvements. I'm just curious about the status of each, and if you are making your way along.
Absolutely. So I alluded to a tedious component of the overall program, which was data gathering between 2016 up to 2018. That was all about data, collecting data, analyzing data, and it was a very active exchange between RTA staff and City of Aurora staff. It was a ballet, back and forth, but we were able to shape what the Aurora Transportation Center looks like today in Aurora. In 2018, the first few improvements were put in place with the relocation of the bus stops close to the railroad tracks on the west side of the train line. And then the kiss and ride improvements with additional parking spaces on the east side of the tracks followed along in 2019 with partial completion of the signage in 2020 through to 2021. The bridge, it's part of that pedestrian bikeability improvements that took about 4 years. Pretty fast, considering that is about a mile long bridge. And like I said, despite the COVID effects, we are witnessing a slight increase in rides. So public transportation is taking a success, is taking a pretty good toll on improving sustainability.
Thank you for sharing, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
Last question. Is there anything in the pipeline for 2023, maybe next year, that we could share in the excitement of or anxiously anticipate?
From a transportation standpoint of view, the City of Aurora is partnering with the Metropolitan Mayor Caucus and CMAP, the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning, on improving or differentiating traffic and source of traffic and means of traffic, meaning that we would like to slowly but significantly make the pace towards electrifying the system. So we will be working on providing the City of Aurora with EV charging stations and diversify our offer to public transportation as well.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Alex.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So the 7 recommendations above were born from the plans, the Aurora Access to Transit Improvement Plan. Some of these recommendations included the addition of signage related improvements, of which we will highlight on the following slides. Derek and I will discuss the items highlighted in blue. All right, Derek, can you help me here and identify the problem in the North Platform area as stated in the Access to Transit Plan?
There's no wayfinding signs.
Yes, yes. That's really the crux of the issue here. At the main Metra platform, we don't have any signage identifying track numbers or track crossing locations, nor do we have any signage on how to cross the tracks to access track 2 platform. No signage identifying key destinations on either side. No, there's a lack of signals, bells, whistles, and gates or other devices at the pedestrian track crossing. Signage consists of one yield sign to alert pedestrians of possible oncoming trains. So I think we all agree that we could do better. And in response, the RTA installed a large stainless steel cabinet here for the 4 map products that we've already discussed. This is back in March of 2020. We would have installations in between March and April of 2020 for a variety of products that we will discuss in just a moment. And so as Derek mentioned, the platforms previously did not have any signage identifying the key destinations in the surrounding area. So here's an example of a sign that went in 2020. It's one of our many directional signs in the area. I just wanted to take a couple and highlight a notable sign or a particularly useful sign here. So the RTA designed and fabricated and installed these signs as part of this, what we'll call like the first phase at ATC. So Derek, I have a question about the existing signage that the RTA has already installed. Me, as the person in charge of sign maintenance at RTA, I'm curious about how you and your team discover and then address vandalism like graffitis, stickers, and or general damage to sign equipment. Do you have a process for maintenance intake requests, or is that something that you guys handle? Or
Yes. So basically, we do comprehensive inspection of the entire site daily, multiple times a day. And if anything of that nature is discovered, we have a graffiti removal process where we have a team that's set up to do that. And we also record the nature of the graffiti and enter into the database.
That's incredible.
We try to get it down in 24 hours or less.
That's faster than I could get it out. Certainly. That's awesome. Thank you for sharing. All right, let's move on to the middle parking lot. Derek, what was the problem here? More or less, it's related to wayfinding signage, but
and again, same answer, no wayfinding signage. So that was a frequent problem where, commuters were coming from the overflow lot in the Lincoln, and once they didn't really know where to go, and it generated a lot of calls and questions, and whereas by adding the signage, that would eliminate that.
Absolutely, thank you. So our plan here is to install 2 neighborhood maps. This is on either side of the cabinet so that riders can easily identify their desired bus stop, wherever that may be, and or areas of interests and popular destinations all within a quarter-mile walk from the station. This is basically a screenshot of a red box collage that we produce here at RTA. This is what we use to approximate the placement of our signs during the pre-construction phase. As you can see, there is actually not a sign there. And the reason for that is that we're waiting for construction in the area to complete. So we will probably keep tabs with Derek and Alex moving forward into the future. And once the construction dust has settled, then we'll get our signs in. Okay. Here's a close-up of the pedestrian underpass that was mentioned before. This is where RTA will install a directional sign mounted directly here onto the wall. Installation date is unknown as we wait for construction in the surrounding area to finish. Our team designed this sign and it will be fabricated and installed by the RTA. Some of these signs, like in the slides before, we might make it and design it, but we'll have in partnership with the city of Aurora, they'll fabricate it and install it. Derek, I got another question for you. How do things like snow plowing, sweeping, and salting in the transit district influence how you prefer to locate new signs on posts or structures?
That's a really good question. So when the implementation of the sign was in progress, right immediately we noticed that there was going to be some interference with some of the maintenance that goes on in the winter. And RTA was more than willing to accommodate replacements and relocations to facilitate those kind of operations.
Awesome, thank you. All right, so we're going to move on to the recommendations for the southern gateway and southern access point. I'm just providing an aerial view of the area in question. Derek, any guesses as to what the problem here is in the Southern Gateway?
Or number one again as well.
Yes. Okay. So the area in this area, the area behind the main southern access point to the station is for bicyclists and pedestrians. Wayfinding signage is needed for pedestrians to easily access the Metra platforms to the north of this area, station depot, and the Pace bus staging area. So what we did here was to create and design a sign that might be in this location. It might not. We're still waiting for construction to finish before going in. Derek, I have a question about what are the capabilities of your shop to fabricate and or install new replacement signs? Do you guys do any of that? The reason why I'm asking is that you talked about the monument signs during our preliminary call. Just curious who would be responsible for constructing and installing that.
As far we do have a sign shop in house, so we could reproduce printed signs, but if anything like major like masonry or things of that nature or metal work.
Got it. Thank you. Are you involved in the monument sign design? Is that something that you might be involved in?
No.
No.
That'd be Alex.
Alex, is that you? Is that your department
Yes.
or office that handles or has
It's
discussions?
a combination, right? It's a combination of departments, zoning and planning, simply because we need to maintain the historic character of the area. Therefore, the signage, architecturally wise, then there needs to be consistency throughout. And the mayor's office of economic development also take care of long range plans. So we do take a look at these specific signs with the engineering department, public works, and street and maintenance as well.
Very good. I had this question sort of in my back pocket. I was saving it for later, but it seems appropriate to ask now. So Alex, I'm going to ask you, was signage helpful in establishing a sense of place or identity? I'm curious about how it impacted the city's branding initiatives and the role maybe a sign might play, since you're a part of the design team.
Absolutely. The project helped a lot and is still helping. Yes, we mentioned that the train station is the terminus of a railroad system. But at the same time, it's just across the street from a beautiful landscape, a beautiful natural scenery created by the river. Now, with the improvements being made at the train station, made the entire stretch along the Fox River more attractive, more marketable, and therefore what used to be just a very simple bare bone parking lot now is going to be called home for 250 apartments coming up on the east side of the river, making the transportation-oriented development concept a reality. So those 250 plus apartments will have a chance to literally feature a train station just across the street and not create a burden on the traffic already in existence in Aurora. They will be able to just cross the street and get to a beautiful station, which it is the Aurora Transportation Center.
That sounds lovely. I'm just going to piggyback off that question just because it's relevant here. What steps or actions is your office taking to encourage TOD around the transportation center?
Well, the city owns certain land along the river, and we try to leverage that, meaning that we have power to make some requests. When it comes down to the development world, we can just approach if developers have not approached us earlier and make the request and say, this is a valuable piece of land. Let's all work together to create a win-win, not only for you, developer, but also for us, city, community. Therefore, we do enforce. We try to enforce a lesser parking ratio, which costs less on the developer side. Therefore, in order to have less parking stalls required, the new developer need to provide certain certain means to make this development to be called a transportation-oriented development.
Mm-hmm. That's very insightful, Alex. Thank you for sharing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, let's get to our last area, the southern access point. This area contains a crucial decision point regarding track access that is not well marked, as stated by the plan. Each side of the fence provides access to a different Metra track and platform. Metra riders should be provided with information regarding correct train track information, as riders are forced to backtrack at this point to access a different platform due to the separation. So as you can see here, we've designed some sign artwork to address where the platforms are located, directions to the bus pickup area, adjacent streets, as well as the parking lot.
Yeah.
Derek, I have a question about the infrastructure. What infrastructure does the city actually own at Aurora Transportation Center?
Oh, it's a kind of a hybrid. So when we refer back to that previous slide that had the tunnel under the tracks, that lot over there off the Lincoln Street and Spring intersection is actually owned by the city. So the main lot and the center permit lot, or the east lot as they refer to, is actually owned combination BNSF Metra, and the city leases it, but performs all the maintenance.
Okay, so then how would you coordinate transit facility maintenance with these other parties like Metra and BNSF? You may have answered this like briefly before, but who's primarily responsible for the maintenance again?
Okay, so the day-to-day maintenance is City of Aurora. So that's our primary responsibility, the facility and grounds. Anything that's going to involve rail or like platform areas or within that egress of the tracks is usually we'll coordinate with BNSF and Metra together.
Oh, okay, interesting. Thank you. All right, so I'm just adding one more slide here for the proposed location of one of our directional signs here at the southern access point. We basically, work with our city representatives and try to come up with a plan that makes sense for everyone. And now we can kind of jump into our question and answer session here. Let's stop. Ooh, I really did stop sharing really early. I didn't realize I had a couple more extra, but thanks for bearing with me. Do we have some questions from the audience that we could field, or I have a couple prepared myself.
So far, it looks like Kevin has been on it in the chat, answering a couple of questions. So thank you,
Thanks, Kevin.
So you can go ahead with yours, John, and
Okay.
if anyone has more, of course, throw them in the chat or raise your hand if you would like.
Sure thing. Well, let me, if no one minds, I'd like to start. What prompted the city to apply for the RTA local planning and technical assistance, Alex?
Yeah, as touch base at the beginning of our conversation, we had a pretty good sense of reality walking through the city with a planning perspective. Things got not been able to be unnoticeable. So we simply identified those crucial point of opportunities, and we decided to work on those based upon that. We saw that the quality of the environment was not in keep with the high standards values, core values that the city had. We also saw great opportunities for future developments up and down the river, east and west of the tracks. And we took it as an opportunity to leverage and sparkle development and improve the quality of our patrons, commuters, visitors.
Sure. Thank you. Would you have any recommendations for any other villages or municipalities that might be interested in applying to RTA local planning for help? Is there any advice that you might want to share with them?
Walk around with open eyes and try to budget not for the immediate, but for the future. You never know. You might be fortunate enough to come across technical assistance programs, but sometimes those programs might entail some participation, city participation. So it's better to plan ahead and think about the future.
Very good. Thank you. Have you had any issues adjoining private sector businesses located in the vicinity of the access to transit improvements? I'm kind of thinking about the Two Brothers Roadhouse. Is that,
yeah.
How did that work?
The neighbors can be allies and enemies at the same time. So it's all about dialogue, keeping the dialogue open and let your allies or your neighbors know in advance what to expect and have them sit at a round table and be part of the decision making. The decision cannot be a vertical decision, but it has to be an horizontal decision.
That's sage advice. That sounds good to me.
There is, sorry to interrupt, there is one question that is kind of relevant to what you just said. The question is, what have been some of the interagency coordination issues that have caused any delays for implementation?
From a policy standpoint of view, from a bureaucratic standpoint of view, I don't think we encountered any roadblocks. The only drawbacks, if we want to call them that way, or hiccups throughout the process were related to the sometimes the purchasing process. But I couldn't really think of any additional major roadblocks.
If no one else, I'd like to ask another one.
There is one more actually.
Oh, please, yeah. I defer.
What were some instances in which plans or designs had to change due to accessibility concerns? And I know, John, you and I have talked about accessibility and design of the signs. Maybe now's a good time to get into that topic too.
Sure. Can you rephrase the question one more time?
Yeah. What, if any, were some instances in which plans or designs had to change due to accessibility concerns?
Sure. Well, let's see. You know, everything that we do here in the Regional Coordination Division, we try to focus on every type of rider, right? Folks with intellectual and developmental disabilities, they require plain and clear wayfinding. Physical accessibility is, we consider that in the early design phases of our signs. An example would be, trying to think here, pulling from memory, the typical installation height of our bus stop cabinets is 5 feet 9 inches. Let's say the existing conditions are that there's a city electrical box right at 5'9", so we can install a sign there. What we would do in order to be ADA compliant would be to probably refabricate that sign to enlarge the font size in order to install it higher. That's sort of the playbook that we follow. So in practice, this means that, yeah, we would have to increase the font size in order to install it higher. The exact font size I'm unaware of, but it's in our design standards manual, and I kind of use it as my reference guide at any given point throughout the day. But I'd be happy to pull that information a little later if you'd like. Okay, if no one else, I'd love to just ask one more. Alex, do you have any insights into effective strategies for navigating local politics and working with politicians?
Once again, I think that from a governance standpoint of view, having an active and proactive dialogue with the stakeholders and your immediate supervisors and active communication among departments that might be involved, that is key for almost a secure success, because it's a solid frontage towards the same goal shared and identified by many. So once you have that consensus built in, it's just a matter of taking one step at a time towards the goal that everybody set, and it's going to be a time to achieve it.
Very good. Thank you. Did I see another question come in, Jessica?
Yes, one more. Has Aurora considered expanding the wayfinding effort beyond just the transit center? For example, how to get to downtown by foot or bike?
Absolutely. Back in 2018, staff applied for, once again, a technical assistance program sponsored by or featured by the Chicago Metropolitan Agency for Planning. Due to COVID, due to budget restrictions issues, the program got stalled, but now after seeing such a success, such an improvement in rates of cyclists up and down the river, on the railroad, on the bikeways and so forth, we decided to bring it back, and we are proposing a new signage program on and off the bike trails, so that we will be able to attract and market local gems in Aurora to the public, coming from north or south, east or west.
That's awesome. Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Any additional questions from the chat?
Not at the moment.
Okay. Let's see. Now that's about it for me as far as the questions go. I know that Alex has a hard stop at 1:59. I want to make sure that he can get to his 2 o'clock.
I apologize. I apologize.
No need to. I told you all from the very beginning, I was planning for about an hour, and we're just coming right up on an hour as we speak.
But I'm excited, and I welcome this dialogue, because it can help us to improve and build partnerships with other municipalities adjacent, or we can be a role model, we hope, or we are more than happy to learn from other municipalities. There's no municipality that is best or worst. We are on the same page to serve our communities. So
thank you so much. I just wanted to say a special thanks to both of my panelists today. I'm sure that we are all very busy with lots of meetings everywhere, all the time, every week, but thanks for carving out 1 hour of your time, and any preliminary emails or prep emails that I may have sent throughout the last week or so. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Thank you.
thank you all.
Yeah, can I add one more thing before we
Yeah.
go?
Yeah, absolutely, please.
So in this whole process, and I'm biased, so as soon as your planning process starts, get your maintenance personnel or divisions involved as soon as possible. It's a lot easier to plan it than it is to correct it.
That's wonderful. That's great advice. Thank you. Well, with that said, hope everyone has a great afternoon. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm looking at some comments about the PowerPoint. I'll be happy to share that. Yeah, I'll be happy to share that. No problem.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a great rest of your afternoon.